All right, looks like the number of participants is slowing down, so we can go ahead and jump in. Welcome everyone. Happy Friday. This is the Westwide Governance Pathways Initiative June stakeholder meeting, and we are grateful for having you all here. We have a relatively short agenda for today, so but I think still continuing to provide these monthly updates, so everybody knows what we're working on. It continues to be important. So today we're going to talk through our final initial board seating proposal. This is what we talked about at our meeting in May, and just wanted to provide an update on the final version of that. We're going to provide an update on the nominating committee process. We have been working to make some revisions and updates to the version that we released in our final proposal last November. So we'll walk through that and then talk a little bit about next steps. I mentioned this during our May meeting, and we'll flag it again. For this meeting, we are not going to be talking about the California legislature. Just as a reminder, the launch committee is not engaged in any sort of lobbying activities, and so as a whole, the group is not engaged in any of the legislative efforts. There are certainly those individual members who are engaging on their own organization's behalf. So if you have any questions about what's happening in California, you can reach out to me or any of the California members of the launch committee, and we'd be happy to provide an update and have some conversations. But we're not going to be talking about that during this call. So with that, we can jump in. Just providing an update on the initial board seating proposal. The proposal itself was to seat an initial 5 of the 7 board members, potentially as early as July of 2026, but no later than January of 2027, which would mean that our nominating committee process would likely begin in January of 2026. So we walked through the details of this proposal in our last meeting. We had a 2-week comment period open. We received 1 set of comments, which were very supportive of the proposal. And so the launch committee has decided to move forward with that proposal as we released it back in May, to move forward as our recommendation. I can pause and see if anybody has any questions about the initial board seating proposal. Those documents are available on the Pathways landing page within the WEAB website if anybody has any questions or wants to see what the details are. All right, we'll keep moving and provide more detail on the nominating committee process. So just as a reminder, we had included a bit of a proposal for the nominating committee procedure in our final proposal in last November, in the November document that we released. We have, given the conversations that we had about the initial board and just more detailed conversations, we have gone through and made some proposed adjustments to some aspects of the nominating committee process. And so what we're going to do today is kind of walk through what our proposal is for that process. We'll highlight at the end sort of which sections within that document we have proposed adjustments to. There is a red line version available on the WEAB website, and then we'll have a comment period opportunity for this particular piece as well, starting today. So just to walk through the details of the nominating committee process, and a lot of this is based again on the nominating committee process for the WEM governing body. So a lot of this should feel familiar to those who've participated in that process. The nominating committee representatives have to be selected at least 150 days before the scheduled expiration of any board member's term. And once the RO, so really this is a proposal for the nominating committee process once the RO is in place and once we have a board in place. The corporate secretary of the RO is going to make sure that we have regional diversity on the nominating committee, and that we don't have a disproportionate number of nominating committee representatives from any one region, but to make sure that we are capturing the full Western region as a whole. Each of the 9 sectors that will be represented on the nominating committee is going to be charged with determining its own method and process for selecting its nominating committee representative, as well as their term of service. This could be 1 year, it could be 3 years. It will really be up to the sector to decide how they want their representative to show up, and how they want to choose that person to participate in this process. If we end up with a sector that does not have a representative, then that corporate secretary is going to choose one for the sector, based on the entities that are registered as part of that particular sector. In addition to the sector representatives that will serve on the nominating committee, there will be a position for an RO board member as well as a representative from the BOSSer. The RO board member is a non-voting member of the nominating committee, and is tasked really with helping to identify candidates for the RO board, as well as serving as a liaison with the other RO board members, who are ultimately tasked with approving or rejecting the slate of nominees. Each of these 2 positions, the RO board member and the BOSSer member, their term shall be 1 year. The BOSSer member is a voting member on the nominating committee, so they do have a vote on determining the slate that gets presented to the full RO board. Next slide, please. The way this is going to work is that the nominating committee will pull together a slate of people as recommendations for each seat on the RO board that will be open. So that can be somebody who is term limited out. It can be somebody whose term is just expiring. But ultimately, the number that number of folks will be the number of people that are on the slate that the nominating committee proposes to the full RO board. The nominating committee is going to act on a consensus basis. And again, the BOSSer member is part of that voting group. The RO board member representative is not. This process, the nominating committee really needs to start to convene at least 100 days prior to the expiration of any of the board member terms. Since this is a pretty robust evaluation and interview process, we want to make sure that we've given enough time to find the right candidates for the RO board. For those who are already who are existing RO board members whose terms are expiring and they wish to seek another term, if they'll have to express that desire, and then the nominating committee decides whether or not they will renominate that person without interviewing other candidates, or whether or not they want to have several candidates from which to choose. In order to move forward without interviewing other candidates, the nominating committee has to have a supermajority of the voting members affirmatively vote to move forward in that way. Otherwise, that existing board member would go through the same process and interviews as any other candidates for the open seats. Next slide, please. To find the board members, the RO board has the option of hiring an executive search firm and bringing that firm on at least 90 days in advance of the expiration of the terms. They don't have to hire an executive search firm, but this is an option that we wanted to make sure was available. This search firm and any other mechanism for finding qualified candidates would really be looking for candidates that have experience in one or more of the following areas: the electric industry, markets, general corporate, legal, or financial experience, and an experience in public interest work. Each of these candidates must meet the standard of independence as defined by FERC in Order 2000 and cannot have any sort of relationship or financial interest in any of the market participants or the RO. This independence vetting is something that will be done independently. And so having that extra layer of independence verification was important for this proposal as well.
Kathleen, can you hear
Yeah,
me? Hi, this
yes.
is Hi, Nora Sheriff on behalf of CLECA, the California Large Energy Consumers Association. I had a couple of quick questions, and I don't know if you want me to save those to the end or raise them when you're talking about, I've got a question about the executive search criteria and then the approval of nominees as it's been written up in the document that y'all sent out.
Yeah, let me finish this slide and then I'm happy to take, since that's relevant to this particular piece, I'm happy to take your questions.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Um, so the executive search firm or any other mechanism for seeking out candidates for the RO board have to have experience in one of these, at least one of these categories. They must meet that level of independence. And so there will be that vetting, whether it's through an executive search firm or just through the nominating committee or through the sectors or whatever that process may look like. Ultimately, then the nominating committee will go through an evaluation process. The sector representatives will work with their sectors to get input on the candidates. And then ultimately, the nominating committee will vote on a slate of candidates that is the same number of open positions for the board, and bring that to the RO board for their either approval or rejection. If the slate is not approved by the RO board, the nominating committee will have to get together and continue their work to put together a new slate. The slate as a whole, what we've envisioned is that this is not going to be a process where the RO board says yes to this person, no to this person. It would reject the slate in whole, although certainly, one or more of the candidates that were on that slate could be reproposed. But the slate as a whole should not look the same as the original slate that was rejected by the board. I will pause then, Nora, and happy to take your questions at this point, and then anybody else too.
Perfect, thank you. So again, Nora Sheriff for CLECA, really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this proposal on a Friday. In the write-up, you talk about having, a broad set of expertise on the RO board, and I agree. I think that's important. In terms of the electric industry expertise, there's a focus on former electric utility executives, and I'm wondering if that, and you also have, retired military officers, electric power reliability councils, et cetera. And I'm wondering if, the last phrase there, if y'all have thought about expanding the reference to present or former executives of firms that perform professional services for utilities beyond just performing services for utilities, but including those who perform services for market participants who might also have a significant amount of expertise in the electric industry. So broadening that scope beyond just the investor-owned utilities.
Sure. I think our intent was that these were examples and not exclusive. So certainly expanding that even the language in there is something that we could do, and would encourage you to suggest that in your comments. I think the only limitation would be making sure that that person meets the independence
Hmm.
criteria.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so if they have some existing contract that would with a market participant, that would probably raise some red flags. But otherwise, I think that having a more broad definition of this kind of experience only benefits the candidate pool. So certainly not limiting.
Okay, great. We'll include that in our comments then.
Great.
And then on the approval of nominees, the write-up talks about individual stakeholders being able to submit letters of recommendation to the RO board supporting both this entire slate or supporting individual candidates. Now, I've participated in the um, nominating committees for the CAISO board and for the WEIM board, and those conversations, it's important to have very fulsome conversations around the candidates, not just regarding their strengths, but then also exploring their weaknesses. So I was wondering if y'all have thought about, you know, expanding that permissive approach, saying you can submit letters supporting the slate or an individual, to say also you can submit letters opposing the slate or an individual, because it would be, I think, good to not limit the dialogue or the discussion about any candidate to just their strengths, but also include an examination of any weaknesses that someone might be able to identify.
I, sure. I mean, I think this is the way we've kind of thought about this is again, not wanting to limit any opportunity to provide whatever input anybody might want to put into the sort of the public record for this process. I think we are the idea here too, because each sector representative is supposed to be engaging with their own sector to get input and of all kinds
Mhm.
on each of the nominees. And so hoping that within those sectors, there's a very robust dialogue about, um, the good qualities, the more challenging qualities, experience with these folks, that those conversations are really happening in a robust fashion within the sector, and that those um, perspectives are being conveyed to the broader nominating committee, as the sort of evaluation of the slate is happening. I don't think there should be any limitation on the kind of written input that folks are able to provide. I mean, we're trying to
Mhm.
really create a very transparent process. So I think I don't see any reason that we should prohibit something like that.
I appreciate that. I just didn't want to have any sort of sense that there might be a chill on
Mhm.
the free flowing discussion and the transparency of the selection process. So
Yeah,
thank you so much, Kathleen. I appreciate you taking the questions.
absolutely. Thanks for having them. Any other questions at this point? All right. Um, so that kind of captures the full proposal of the nominating committee process. We'll go to the next slide. Um, you will note that some of the areas where we had made some changes to our original proposal, again from our November final proposal, are in sections 3.2, section 3.4, 3.5, and 3.6, and you will see the red line version so you can see specifically what changes that we put into that document. Next slide, please. We are going to going to have a 2-week comment period starting today. Comments will be due on Friday, July 11th. As always, submit your comments to our comments email address. And I will pause again, see if anybody else has any additional questions about the nominating committee process, or if there are any other members of the launch committee or formation committee that want to provide any additional context that I missed. All right, seeing none, our next launch committee, or I'm sorry, our next stakeholder meeting will be July 25th. We'll present, we'll have a follow-up on this discussion based on the comments that we receive and any adjustments that we need to make at that point. You can find all of our materials on that Weeb website, looking up the Pathways Initiative landing page. Allie.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find my raise hand icon quickly enough. I just had a question about the initial RO board selection, and I was just curious in the version, and my recollection, I may not be remembering correctly, but it looked like at one point the formation committee was going to be performing the function of the RO board, and it's changed to the launch committee. And I was just curious if you could talk a little bit more about that change and the thinking behind switching from the formation committee to the launch committee for that role.
I actually, you may have stumped me, in part because I just returned from a 2-week vacation, and my memory is going to have to get jogged here. So if there are other members of the launch committee that can jump in and help me, that would be great. But so we had, and partly now I can't remember where we landed. We had originally said that we wanted it to be the formation committee that would serve in the role of the RO board to approve the initial slate of board members. We then had a conversation about do we want it to be the full launch committee so that we ensure that we have broader representation from all of the stakeholder groups. I think that's where we landed. To have the launch committee serve in that role, in part because the formation committee was less focused on ensuring that we had all of the sectors represented on the formation committee, and more focused on ensuring that we had people with the time to actually work on these detailed pieces. And so having the full launch committee serve in that role to approve the initial slate of board members instead of the formation committee brings in that broader stakeholder perspective, makes sure that we have that both the sector diversity that has been pretty critical throughout this entire process. So that was really, unless I've completely screwed this up, which is entirely possible, and I will make sure that I confirm. But that was really kind of the thought process behind that piece.
Kathleen,
okay,
this
thank
is
you.
Jim.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Kathleen, this is Jim. You summarized it properly.
Oh, thank God, Jim. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Any other questions? I'm just glad I haven't forgotten everything in the couple. And we can let's see, will you go back, Sarah, put the website and the email address. There we go. So again, all of these the email addresses for any comments are all also on the Weeb website. So if you missed this, we'll post these slides on there as well. So you can see the slides, the materials with the details on the proposal are all posted on that website as well. If for some reason you can't find anything or have any questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Sarah, and we will make sure you get the information that you need. And at that point, actually go to the last slide, has all of our, here's all of the contact information that anybody might need. So last chance. Any other questions, comments?
Well done on your first day back from vacation, Kathleen. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be back. I've missed everybody. Well, with that, appreciate all of your attendance and attention, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all again in a month. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.